everybody, I'm Allie and welcome to the Sweet November Stamps video hop. And today I'm going to be using our brand new Seabird set. And we're also going to use an older set, Dock on the Bay, to create our scene. Let's get going. So I've already got our flamingo and our sentiment. And it says, sending you a little vitamin C. I'm using some Memento Tuxedo Black ink today because I'm going to be doing some Copic marker coloring, and this is my favorite black ink for that. My ink pad happens to be not so juicy, so I'm just stamping everything a couple of times to make sure that it's nice and black and crisp. And apparently I'm getting my Misty all dirty too. All right, so we're going to create a scene with our flamingo. So I'm actually going to take my card base to my larger Misty, and we're going to do that over there. So I've got our card base in my regular sized Misty, and we're going to put a mask over our little flamingo because our little flamingo is in the foreground, and we need to put him on this cute little rock. So his feet, of course, is going to be seen as on the rock, so therefore it has to be masked off. Now, we're also going to use this island piece here, and we're going to kind of put it in the background of our cute little flamingo. And that looks pretty good. We're also going to use Memento Tuxedo Black for this. And away we go. Our background has been stamped, and of course, this is the fun part. Get to peel off that mask to reveal your completed scene. And there it is. Let's get coloring. We're going to start by working on the water first, and what I kind of envision for this card is just to kind of have a wispy little edge. I'm not going to do the whole scene right across, so we're just going to kind of make the scene stop and start kind of into the card and not all the way across. Just another way to think about your coloring, that it doesn't have to be a complete scene. It can be something that's kind of fades into the background. So this is BG45, and we're just putting a base coat down for our C here, and away we go. Okay, there's our base. Now let's add some texture. We're going to start with BG23. This is kind of a little bit more in the green tones. So I'm just trying to kind of add some towards the back as a way to tone down the blue. And then we're just going to kind of make streaks in other places as highlights and lowlights. So you can just kind of randomly choose some lines, and I'm not worried about the fact that we have marker marks, like streaks in it, because it just adds to the texture of the water. So I'm good with that. We're going to go around the marks around our rock. And again, I'm not worried about streaks because it's just going to add to the texture. Who doesn't love already done texture? You don't have to work for it. Just going in just to darken just a tiny little bit here. And of course they are going to dry a little bit more subtle, and that's okay. You can always go over them with the same color to deepen and darken the marks, or you can find something that's a little bit darker and use that. But there we go. Make some streaks to your BG23. Then we're going to go BG15, and we're going to do the same thing. It's all about adding the texture. And again, this one is a little bit darker, so we're going to use this a little bit more sparingly. We're going to get that little cove in there. We're going to use most of this kind of in that background area. We'll use it very sparingly in the front. And again, if you find that your lines are a little bit too harsh, like you don't like how linear they are, go in with a lighter marker and go over top of them. And what that does is it helps blend them back into that background. So I'm just kind of mimicking that water feel. And again, I'm using very sparingly this color down here, because it's a darker marker and I want to use it kind of more so in the background. There we go. Again, very, very simple. And if you want them to blend, go back with one of your lighter colors. Okay, BG13. And again, this is even slightly more dark than the last one. So again, very, very sparingly. Use a little bit in the back here. And just a few minor touches of it in other places. Sometimes I'm even going over top of the previous color just to darken it, and that's it. And we'll do a touch down here just to accentuate those water ripples, and very, very few down here. Very, very thin. There we go. And I like that end result. Let's move on to that little island in the back. So we're actually going to do the sky first. And the reason behind my switcheroo is that if I go over the trees with the blue for the sky, it's not a big deal because I'm just going to color over them with markers. Like, see, going over that palm tree. I'm just going to go over them with another color. So I'm okay with kind of doing the sky first. We're going to get in between all those palms to get our base color down. Away we go. We're going to deepen and darken a few spots with a B14. And just do a little bit of a darker spot kind of in amongst the trees here. This will help set off that background too. Doesn't have to be perfect. And we're going to go in and blend this a little bit. So we're just going into those sneaky spots in the background here. Just a tiny bit. So in order to blend that out, those lines a little bit, we're going to go in with the lighter color, the B12. And it'll just soften the edges a little bit of that darker B14. I'm not worried about going over any of these parts, just wherever there's kind of like an edge poking out. Now, because this is sky, I want to soften this up a little bit. And in order to do that, we're actually going to use a 0 or a colorless blender. And I'm going to actually sweep in from the white space. And this is just going to cause some of that area to be pushed back into the paper, so it will actually lighten that edge. it'll kind of soften everything there. I'm going to go right down into this edge too. So be very careful where you drop the tip of this, because you can actually make polka dots. So if you go from the white space in, then you're not really doing that. You're making a flicking motion, so it's going to go in and feather off. So that's how we're going to do that. We want our little palm trees to be nice and bright. So we're going to use some YG markers. We're going to start with a YG 23, and I'm literally going to color everything as far as palm tree leaves in the YG 23 just to get our base down. Now we're going to go in with the darkest green for our palms, YG 17. And I'm just going to kind of add where I think the shadows would fall. And sometimes that's completely on a leaf that's like tucked under. So we're going to do that and add all of our darkest shadows. And I may go a touch darker yet. I haven't figured that out. We'll just start here, and if we need to darken stuff, we can. That's not as dark as I kind of want it, so we're actually going to use that as our midtone. And just like you, I don't always know the colors that I'm going to use until I get there. All right, let's add some G46 and see if we can darken that up. Ah, that's much, much better. Like I said, I sometimes don't know the color combos I'm going to use until it's actually time to pick them. So always have like a scrap of paper off to the side too, just to see how well things blend together. Because sometimes things don't always blend like you think they'll blend. So always give everything a little test on a scrap. I quite often keep all of my scrap little pieces from doing fussy cutting out some of my images for that purpose specifically. And I'm just going to draw that back in, just to make them a little bit longer. There, the contrast is much better now. Okay, let's do the greenery off the back of the island there. We're going to do a different green combo for this one. This time I'm going to start with my darker green, my G24. And what we're going to use this for is to kind of dapple or stipple in, because these would be kind of leafy little bushes, or at least that's what I'm saying. And so we're going to add kind of the deepest, darkest part. And of course you can be absolutely random. And we might also have to add a darker green to this to push them back. There we go. Let's actually go and do a darker green on those. I think I will go in with our G46. This is the same dark one that we used on our palms. And even though we've used this already, when we go over this with a light color, it's going to make that green look different than when we used it up here. Because we used a yellow green as our beginning color, and this one we're just going to use a regular G. And just adding more texture. Now, because it's in the background, you don't have to do a lot of texture, because backgrounds are going to lose their texture when you look at them by eye. And this is just a G21, and I'm going over the entire thing. And because this is lighter, it will cause everything to be pushed back into the paper. so it softens the dots and makes them less obvious. Okay, there we go. Still leaves us with dimension, but makes everything a little bit blurrier because it's in the background. I always say, tell yourself a story. We'll come back to the trunks. I'm going to start on the foreground of our little island. I'm going to assume this is a cute little sandy beach, and we're going to put some beachy colors down in here, tucked away. There we go, an E30 for a base. I'm going to go to my darkest, E33. We're going to do kind of that water line in from the sides here. Okay. I'm going to go in with a medium E21 and just kind of flick out that darker color into the lighter. And again, what that lighter color is doing is pushing that dark ink into the paper so it blends really nicely. Okay. I'm liking it so far. I'm going to go back to my E30, and I am going to push this beach back just a little bit farther because we're going to blend it into the rock. So we're going to push it back. Even though this is quite high in relationship to the water, we're just going to get inventive here. Okay. This is T2. And I'm going to put a base coat of T2 down, and I'm just going to make that edge a little bit more random where the beach meets the stones, those rocks. And I'm going to go down and do this as well. We're going to go all the way down to the shoreline and put our base coat down. And we're also going to do the stones in the foreground on this side. Again, base coat first. Okay, T4. We're going to go in and give the rock some dimension and some scraggly bits and some pockets. You know how volcanic rock, it erodes away. Kind of pebbly and rough, very, very rough. So we're going to go in and add some kind of divots, pock marks, and dipsies and doozies. This is where you kind of just go random. We're going to go in with another shade of gray. This is a warm gray, so it's got a little bit more brown to it. And we're going to go in and add just a tiny little bit more detail. This is slightly darker. So again, this just adds more texture, more detail, and just use this even more sparingly. And it just helps add to that look of stone. We're going to go in and darken some of our shadows on these rocks and add a little bit more pocky marks. Like I said, you can get super creative. Itty bitty teeny tiny dots. It's amazing what your Copic marker points can give you for detail. There we go. Well, let's go in with our darkest, our E33, and just give a little texture to the edge of our beach, just coming in off the sides. Now, if you find that you can't get like a super fine detail from your tips, number one, your tips may be ready, they may need to be changed, because you can actually break down the tips and lose that point off the tip. You can sometimes they need to be changed, and sometimes it's just practice that you need. quite often I will pull in my colored pencils and do the finer detail like that too. Let's do the rock that our little flamingo is standing on. And yes, I have noticed that there's some uncolored aspects up here. That's okay. We'll get to that. I am going to put a tiny kind of underwash of our E30. And this will just help tie it into our background. Okay. So I'm going to go in with the same neutrals. So I am going to go in with our T2. And I'm going to go right over those browns. Okay. So what it does is it gives a warmer tone to your rock. It's very, very subtle. And only you will probably know that that tan colored is down there. It just makes your rock that much more authentic. Okay, we're going to go in with our T4 again. Again, these are the same neutrals that we used for the rocky background. We're going to go in and accentuate this part, the divot in the rock. We're going to go underneath his cute little foot. And for this one, I really didn't decide specifically where my sun or my light source was coming from, just because I didn't feel like it. You don't always have to have a light source, just have fun coloring. Okay, there is the T4. We are going to go in with our warm 4. And this one, we're going to do a little touch of stony dotty spotties. There we go, and you can do them randomly. Do some big ones and some baby ones. There we go. Fun, fun, fun. And then we're going to soften them a little bit by pushing them back in with our light T2. So you can go over as much or as little of that rock as you want. Again, by doing this, this has a little bit more blender solution than those darker colors, and it's just going to push your ink down in. And again, everything doesn't have to be realistic looking. This is a cartoon styled outline drawing, so color it that way. It's okay. Let's quickly go in and do the palm tree trunks. I'm going to use an E71 to get the darkest. This is my darkest. I'm going to make sure I come underneath those palms because they're going to cast a shadow down that trunk. I'm just going to do the complete little trunk there, and then I'm just going to do the remainder with an E70. Simple as that. And I went in and just added the same green that we did for all of those bushes. And I filled in the things that I missed. Because you know what? We all do it. So we're going to go in and color our flamingo. And I'm going to put a whole base on everything with an R30. Okay, let's start with our darkest color. We're going to go in around his eyeballs to push back the eye. We're going to go underneath his cheek. We're going to accentuate each of those feather lines. A little touch behind kind of the crest of his eyeball. We're going to go down the chinny chin side and then down the back. We're going to do all of the dark parts wherever you think you would get a shadow. And again, I have not chosen a direction of light. So this is all just whatever I kind of think would look the best. Okay. We'll come back to his beak. And yes, flamingos legs are pink. A lot of this little fella is pink. We're just going to put a couple of feather lines, kind of build them in there. Okay, we're going to put a little bit of shadowing on his legs, kind of leaving his knees, lighter. Okay, let's blend our dark into our light. R32. Now, this one has a little bit of a peachy undertone to it, which I kind of like. I pulled up a couple of photographs. I just wanted to see their true coloring. And some of them had some very unique coloring in a sense that they kind of had very, very light feathers on some of their wings. And then they had very, very stark pink on some of their other feathers. So it's very interesting looking at them. And of course, the more shrimp they've eaten, the pinker they are. True fact. Okay, okay, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to go back to my R30. We're just going to kind of round out, sort of semi-blend out those two tones a little bit more. We're leaving the previous R30 as a highlight. Now, if you want to go back, if you find that you've lost some of the details that you've put in, like some of your feather lines, just go back in with your darker. I'm going to go right over that section. There we go. Blend out just a tiny bit on those legs. They're so tiny. Okay, let's go and do his beak. They kind of have a little tinge of color kind of coming out from their beak, sort of. So we're going to kind of add that. Okay. And then the very tip of their beak is typically very dark. So typically it's like really, really black. But I'm going with a T7 as a base. And then I'm going to put a little bit darker on the under side of the beak with a T9. Just to push that back, and a little tiny bit on the tip. There we go. Some flamingos even have a little bit of black on their tails and their wings. The only thing left we have to do is our little starfish. And to make everything kind of united, let's do it pink, just like our flamingo. It just helps tie in the drawing. So I'm going back to the R30 as a base. R32, we're just going to add a little bit of shadow, even just on almost all of it. I am going to go and darken with an R43. And there she goes. Our flamingo is all ready to go. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you've learned something, and I'll see you again soon. Don't forget to check the description box for the next person on the hop. Good luck!